Hello friends. Antarctica is the only continent in the world where there is no country, no government, and no indigenous tribal people who have been living there for centuries. The main reason behind this, obviously, is that it is the coldest continent in the world. Here, the temperature can drop as low as minus 89 degrees Celsius. At the same time, it is also the windiest place in the world, where snowstorms can reach speeds of 300 kilometers per hour and can blind you completely. And Antarctica is also the driest continent in the world, to such an extent that you'll be surprised. It is actually classified as a desert. Throughout the entire year, it only gets around 51 millimeters of rainfall, and even when it does rain, it turns into snow as soon as it hits the ground. So, if you look at it, Antarctica is the only place in the world where human influence is almost non-existent. But that doesn't mean that different countries around the world haven't tried to claim Antarctica. Just look at this map. France says that this part of Antarctica belongs to France. Norway claims that this section is theirs. Australia stakes its claim on this entire right side. Apart from this, countries like Britain, Chile, Argentina, and New Zealand also lay claim to different parts of Antarctica. So, is Antarctica really divided among these different countries? Let's find out in today's video, friends, about the fascinating geopolitics and history of Antarctica.
Antarctica. Umpires decide total of continent, which challenge them, since first, they can sail beyond the limits of high rise. The Antarctic continent is surrounded by frozen seas. The south, the bottom of the world, is considerably colder than the top of the world. Decisions to study the strange wonders of the amazing Antarctica. For some, Antarctica's secrets are just one piece in the greater puzzle, the challenges faced by humans in all corners of the universe.
Let's start our story from the very beginning. Around 350 BC, the Greek philosopher Aristotle was among the first people to say that the Earth is actually round. At that time, the Greeks knew that there was a place called the Arctic in the north of the Earth. They used to call it Arctos. The word Arctos actually comes from bear. In the sky, among the constellations, there is one called the Great Bear. So, by looking at that constellation, they named the Arctic as Arctos. Now, since we knew that the Earth is round, if there is something in the north, there will be something in the south as well. So they thought, whatever is in the south, let's name it Antarctos. This means the opposite of that bear, the reverse of Arctos. And that's exactly where the name Antarctic comes from, friends. Although humans first set foot on Antarctic land only around the 1890s, Antarctica had already started appearing on maps several centuries before that. When many explorers went on expeditions around the world, they knew that if they traveled south on Earth, there was land that existed there. But they didn't know exactly what was on that land, how big it was, or what it was like. For this reason, when the French explorers made a map of the Earth in 1530, they definitely drew Antarctica on it. Look at this map. On the left side, the northern hemisphere is shown, and on the right side, the southern hemisphere is shown. In the middle of this southern hemisphere, they named the largest landmass Terra Australis Incognita. This means unknown southern land. About 200 years later, in 1773, British naval officer James Cook became the first person to go south of the Antarctic Circle. He was about 130 kilometers away from Antarctica when he turned his ship back. Although he didn't actually see Antarctica, he did spot icebergs that contained rock deposits. When he saw those rocks, he concluded that yes, a place like Terra Australis must really exist. And getting any closer to Antarctica was so dangerous that he famously said, "I can be bold to say that no man will ever venture farther than I have done, and that the lands which may lie to the south will never be explored." He was so certain that no one could ever reach Antarctica because the place was so dangerous, the winds were so strong, and ships could crash into any iceberg. But about 50 years later, his words would be proven wrong. And who actually set foot on Antarctic land for the first time is quite a controversial topic, because many people claim that they were the first person. British-American Captain John Davis believed that he was the first to do this because his ship got lost, and he ended up in Antarctica. The first undisputed landing happened in 1895, when a Norwegian ship named Antarctic reached its shores. The people on this ship launched a small boat, in which 6 or 7 people went ashore onto Antarctic land. Among those in the boat was a Norwegian named Karsten Borchgrevink. He claims that he was the first to get off the boat and set foot on Antarctic land. But there was also a man from New Zealand, Alexander, who says that he too was in the boat and that he was actually the first to step out of the boat to steady it. So basically, two people sitting in the same boat are arguing about who got off first, and who was the first to set foot on Antarctica. There's even a really funny drawing of this, which you can see here on the screen. It shows Alexander sneaking out of the boat from behind, trying to jump out first, so he could be the first person to set foot there. And the rest of the people in the boat are just sitting there shocked, thinking, what did he just do? We were supposed to be first. After this, the first 10 to 20 years of the 1900s are called the heroic era of Antarctic exploration, because many expeditions took place during this time, which led to new scientific discoveries and taught us many new things about Antarctica. We found out for the first time that plants also grow on this continent, when mosses were discovered growing in Antarctica. And after this heroic era began the colonial period of Antarctica, when many countries tried to establish their control over Antarctica. Between 1908 and 1942, 7 different countries claimed sovereignty over the continent. These countries were Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom. Apart from these, there were several other countries like the US, the Soviet Union, Japan, Sweden, Belgium, and Germany that were exploring and launching new expeditions. They were doing this in Antarctica without making any territorial claims. During Hitler's time, in 1939, there was a German Antarctic expedition. In this expedition, they took ropes with them and took photographs of some areas of Antarctica. They dropped metal Nazi swastikas from airplanes onto the ground to claim that wherever they dropped their symbol, that area was now under Nazi Germany's control. Surprisingly, during this period, the USA was not a very active country. In 1924, the U.S. Secretary of State announced the official position of America regarding territorial claims in Antarctica. He said that if any country actually discovers new land in Antarctica, it doesn't mean that the newly discovered land will belong to that country. That land will only belong to that country if there is actually some settlement on it. People from that country would have to come and permanently live on that land, and that has never happened. After World War II ended, all these countries started fighting even more fiercely with each other to grab land in Antarctica. Now, when I use the word fight, I don't mean that they literally went to war with each other. What I mean is that they were asserting their claims even more strongly. These countries set up permanent research stations in Antarctica to show that, look, we have a permanent station here. Now people are living there permanently, researchers are working there, so this land should belong to us. If you look at the map of Antarctica, there are several islands that are close to Antarctica. One of them is the Heard and McDonald Islands. In 1947 to 48, Australia set up its stations on these islands. In 1953, these are the Kerguelen and Crozet Islands, where France established its permanent bases. Then, the next year in 1954, Australia actually reached mainland Antarctica and built the Mawson Station, which was actually on the Antarctic continent itself. A year later, Argentina built its General Belgrano Station. This was also on Antarctica, on the Filcher ice shelf. By the way, there is so much ice accumulated in Antarctica that it's hard to tell where there's just ice and where there's actually land underneath the ice. That's why, in this map, you can see that there are some ice shelves extending beyond the land of Antarctica. These ice shelves have been given different names. Setting up these research stations became a kind of political strategy for many countries. At one point, the British, Chilean, and Argentinian bases were so close to each other that it was obvious these stations weren't just built for scientific research. It was clearly visible that these stations were being set up for intelligence activities. In fact, the territorial claims of these 3 countries on Antarctica also overlap. Now, take a look at this political map of Antarctica. These blue dots represent the various countries' current bases, the research stations that exist in Antarctica today. Now, the land claims made by Norway, Australia, France, and New Zealand in Antarctica are quite clear. It's obvious which land each of them claims, and there is no overlap between their claims. But if you look at the left side of the map, you'll see that the claims made by Chile, Britain, and Argentina are starting to overlap with each other. Within Chile's claim, the British and Argentine claims are also present. In 1950, the Soviet Union's government issued a memorandum to all other countries stating that if any country made a territorial claim or took decisions regarding Antarctica without consulting the Soviet Union or without its participation, then the Soviet Union would not recognize any such claim. By this time, the Cold War had already begun between the United States and the Soviet Union, and people started to fear that these 2 countries might start playing their geopolitical games over Antarctica as well. These 2 countries were already fighting each other in different parts of the world, so there was a concern that they might start clashing over the land in Antarctica as well. But thankfully, that didn't happen. In 1958, American President Eisenhower issued a notice to other governments, suggesting that there should be a treaty to ensure that Antarctica always remains a free and peaceful place. On October 15, 1959, a conference was held in Washington about this, and on December 1, 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was signed. This treaty laid out three major points. First, Antarctica will only be used for peaceful purposes. Second, everyone will have the freedom to conduct scientific investigations. And third, the results from scientific observations will be freely exchanged and made available to everyone. Initially, this treaty was signed by 12 governments, which included all the countries that were making territorial claims on Antarctica. But the most interesting thing about this treaty is that the claims made by these countries were not abolished. Those claims are not nullified. This treaty just temporarily suspends those claims. So, legally speaking, all these countries can continue to claim those territories even today, and in fact, they still do. This political map of Antarctica is still valid to this day. Australia has the largest share in it. Australia claims 42% of Antarctica's land. But it's also important to note that, in reality, the United States rejects all these countries' claims. Not just the United States, but most countries around the world reject all these territorial claims. And it's not just that. Even the 7 countries that are claiming territories in Antarctica don't recognize each other's claims. France, Australia, New Zealand, and Norway do recognize each other's claims, but the UK, Chile, and Argentina do not recognize each other's claims because their territories overlap. As of today, when these countries claim that this land in Antarctica is theirs, it's really just symbolic. This treaty has temporarily suspended all these claims. But this also means that when the treaty expires, all these territorial claims will become important. That's the reason why, even today, these 7 countries are still claiming territories in Antarctica. This treaty will expire in the year 2048. After that, whether this treaty will be renewed or not is something to watch out for. We'll talk more about this later in the video, about why it's so important to control, why it maybe shouldn't be renewed. But as of today, thankfully, because of this treaty, there's been very little geopolitics played in Antarctica. The International Council of Scientific Unions formed a special committee to conduct research in Antarctica. Scientists from different countries are coordinating together on this. That's the reason why, every year, around 4,500 scientists go to Antarctica to work. And there's been strong collaboration among scientists from various countries. Now, friends, it's also really interesting to know about India's role in this whole story. In the beginning, actually, India was completely against the Antarctic Treaty, because India believed that this treaty was just a way for these 10 or 12 countries to take over Antarctica. Even though these countries agree that it will only be used for peaceful purposes, it's possible that all these countries might start mining here as well. If oil is found underneath, these countries could mine the oil and make a profit from it. India had actually appealed to the United Nations to take control over the entire continent, but that didn't happen. About 30 years later, in December, India launched its first expedition to Antarctica, and India did this quite secretly so that other countries wouldn't find out about it. This was being led by renowned marine biologist Syed Zahur Qasim. India had actually acquired an icebreaker ship from Norway called the Polar Circle for this expedition. This expedition was successful, and at that time, a magazine called New Scientist jokingly posted a headline saying, "Indians quietly invade Antarctica." In reality, India did not invade Antarctica. It was just a research expedition. But doing this was illegal because India was not a part of the Antarctic Treaty. So technically, India was not allowed to go to Antarctica and conduct research there. At that time, India was also part of the non-aligned movement. When the Cold War was going on between the US and the Soviet Union, most countries were either on one side or the other, but India was not aligned. India didn't support either of these two countries. In 1983, the non-aligned countries put so much pressure on the United Nations that finally, the United Nations General Assembly said, "All right, we will now take up the topic of Antarctica in the next meeting." About a month before the meeting, India signed the Antarctic Treaty and applied for consultative party status. This was quite shocking for the other countries because, up until that point, India was against the Antarctic Treaty, and then suddenly, India also signed the treaty. Today, India has 2 active research stations in Antarctica, where ongoing research and studies are conducted, especially related to geology. During India's second expedition to Antarctica, scientist Sudipta Sengupta was present there. Through her research, she studied and discovered that the Skirmaker Hills on the coast of Antarctica were actually part of a fault line connected to the Indian subcontinent, which eventually broke apart. It was from that very point that it broke off, traveled to India, collided with Tibet, and led to the formation of the Himalayas. That's how India actually became a part of the Asian continent. After this, in 1991, an environmental protection treaty was also signed in Antarctica, which is called the Madrid Protocol because it was signed in Madrid, the capital of Spain. It was in this protocol that restrictions were finally placed on drilling and mining activities in Antarctica. This means that no country is allowed to conduct mining or drilling in Antarctica. We have to protect and preserve it. This step was very necessary because many countries in the world are extremely hungry for oil. So many places have already been destroyed in the name of oil exploration. And in 1992, a study was conducted by a U.S. Geological Survey expert, which found that there are 19 billion barrels of oil beneath Antarctica that could potentially be recovered. Mineral explorers in Russia claim that there are actually 500 billion barrels of oil and gas beneath Antarctica. But there are two reasons why oil mining has not been done in Antarctica to this day. The first reason is the Madrid Protocol, which protects the treaty from this. And the second reason is that it's extremely expensive to do this, at least as of today. But in the coming years, the risk could increase even more because of climate change. As the ice melts because of climate change, accessing Antarctica will become even easier. Over time, new technologies will develop, and maybe this won't be so expensive anymore. Then, extracting oil and gas from there could become economically viable. And as I mentioned, this treaty expires in the year 2048. If all these countries don't renew the treaty, then this could become possible after that time. Many countries have already started exploiting the oceans around Antarctica by fishing there, like China. China has recently expanded fishing and tourism there. In fact, since the year 2000, China is the only country that has built new research stations in Antarctica. No other country has established new stations there. Besides this, according to data from 2018, there were several private yachts where wealthy private individuals went all the way to Antarctica's land and illegally interfered with the natural environment there. Many countries are discussing that a new treaty should be created to regulate the waters and ocean areas surrounding Antarctica, so that overfishing can't take place there, no one can enter illegally, and that area can also become protected. Since 2003, the Antarctic Treaty now also has a permanent physical presence. Its headquarters are in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So, from a geopolitical perspective, as of today, Antarctica is not a country, but it is definitely a political territory where several countries collaborate together and share power equally among themselves. But Antarctica doesn't have its own police force, army, or legal system. So even today, we can see the loopholes in this treaty being exploited. If tourists visit the British station in Antarctica as part of tourism, it's called Port Lockroy, then tourists can actually get their passports stamped there. Tourists can also go to the Chilean and Argentinian territories and get their passports stamped there as well. This is another way these countries express their claims. What do you think about this, friends? What do you think the future of Antarctica should be? Should things continue the way they are, with all countries working together, no mining or drilling allowed, and people only going there for scientific research or as tourists? Or should humans explore Antarctica even further? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I hope, as always, that you enjoyed the video. If you found this video interesting, you'll probably like my entire geopolitics playlist as well. You can click here to check it out. See you in the next video. Thank you so much.